What's going on, YouTube? This is BBSP, Blue Bowl Sports and Politics. Long time no see. I know it's been a while since I uploaded a video and whatnot. I'm going to start doing a little series here about going way back. I hear so much toxic and toxicity, toxic places about today's basketball and everything. We can't enjoy the game without certain fan bases intervening and certain fan bases getting on in their feelings because someone else shares an opinion and all that stuff. So I'm gonna stray away from that for a couple of videos. You know what I mean? But I'm still gonna download some of the latest of what's going on recently. We know the NBA season starting up here pretty soon, whatever, and I'm gonna be doing more and more videos as the season weighs on. You know what I mean? But I really haven't been on here because, like I said before, my personal life precedes over everything, you know? I could be on here 24/7 arguing back and forth with certain fan bases, certain certain people who have certain agendas out there. You know who I mean. You know who I'm talking about. But for myself, my life precedes everything else over this YouTube shit. End of the day, because I got more important things I got to worry about in my life. More important things going on in my life, and just be sitting out here 24/7 arguing people back and forth on YouTube. It's not constructive for me. You understand? And that's why I really haven't been uploading videos recently, because once again, my personal life precedes everything else. But I'm gonna start a series here very soon, as far as like going back to the greatest teams of the past, breaking them down, and giving a brief history on each team and their journey towards the championship and their run towards the championship, various championships. I'll upload a video every week. I'll probably just proceed, go forward from here on out. Now you're thinking to yourself, why am I not starting with the Boston Celtics or the George Mikan Lakers? I feel that those are too easy. They're probably the first dynasties in the NBA. As you know, George Mikan Lakers dominated in the 1950s. And then, of course, you had the 60s run with the Celtics. You know the names: Russell, Cousy, Havlicek, K.C. Jones, Frank Sanders. Back. That's too easy. But I wanted to give a look back, historical perspective on the 1967 Philadelphia 76ers. They finished the season at 68-14, top of the Eastern Conference. They had been trying to get over the hump for years now. Boston Celtics have been a thorn in their side for years. And ever since Russell Celtics started that run with them, they've been trying to get over the hump with this team. And when 1967 came, everyone felt like that was finally the year. Finally the year Wilt, of course, they would get over the hump and they would finally win the championship and finally beat the dreaded Boston Celtics. Of course, you had Wilt Chamberlain, who was in his prime, right in the middle, towards the end of his prime. I want to say he was in the middle of his prime, like approaching towards the tail end, because you got to think, 1967, a couple of years later, he went to the LA Lakers. And yet again faced Boston in the finals. But here, he was probably approaching towards the tail end of his prime. But he had a team that was more than well equipped to finally knock off the Boston Celtics. I mean, I feel like when you look at the 1967 76ers, they're probably one of the most underrated teams of all time. Probably because nothing about them was flashy. They were just good in every facet of the game. Not only you had Wilt, you had Al Greer, and you had Chet Walker. You're probably two wing players. Two wing players that were probably could match up with Havlicek and Casey Jones. That Boston backcourt. Shit, when you think about it, the word super team gets thrown around easily around a lot. You can make a case that those 76ers teams were at or near that level. Because like I said before, you had Hal Greer, Chet Walker, two wing players that were quick, they were fast, they could score in the pick and roll, and they could pass. Then you had Luke Jackson, who could easily have been played a center if it wasn't for Wilt Chamberlain. If it wasn't for Wilt Chamberlain, he probably would have been the best player, hands down, on those 76ers, on that team. Because you think he was more of what we call a hybrid forward. Guys like Kevin Garnett and guys like Amari Stoudemire, Rasheed Wallace. Early on, you had Karl Malone, of course, and then in some aspects, Charles Barkley. But Luke Jackson, I feel like, was one of the first, if not the first, hybrid forward in history, because he could shoot from the outside, he could rebound, he could post up, and he was like that detonator for the 76ers. And he complimented Wilt well in the front court. Then you had the bench. Yeah, Wally Jones, Billy Cunningham, who could have, if the Sixth Man of the Year award was around there, he would have been a runaway winner, straight up. Then you had the rookie Mac Lucas, and probably had the most formidable bench. They finally had a formidable bench that could match up with Boston's at that particular time. And then you had Alex Hannum, who was one of the best coaches in the league, right up there with Auerbach, probably after Auerbach. He installed a system to where everybody was successful, and they pretty much flourished that entire season. They pretty much flourished in that season. So, when they got to the playoffs, back then it was a bye. The best team had the bye. You understand? It wasn't like best of five, it was actually best of seven, but it wasn't the best of five first round. They added the first round, if I'm not mistaken, if I believe back in the 1970 season, 1969, 70 season. I'm not sure about that. I got to look back on that. But for me, I got to look back. I got to check that out. When did they add the first round for the highest seed? So, yeah. First round, they got a very formidable opponent coming out of the bye, which was Cincinnati Royals, which was led by Oscar Robertson. Oscar was pretty much, he was looking for a championship reign as well, a championship ring. Trying to put himself in that conversation himself. He was looking for a championship himself, but unfortunately for him, he ran into a juggernaut in the Sixers team. Basically whatever impact Oscar had, Chet Walker and Hal Greer matched that times two. And of course, you had Wilt dominating inside and out. And then you had Luke Jackson, and then you had Billy Cunningham and Wally Jones and Matt Gucker's doing their thing off the bench, it was pretty much a mismatch when you think about it. Oscar, people talk about 1-on-5 and everything. That was the epitome of 1-on-5 right there, because Oscar was out there getting triple doubles. Oscar was out there giving it his all, but he couldn't match up to the dominance of the 76ers. But they pretty much won that series going away. They ran away with that series. But the series they had their eye on was the Boston Celtics. Could they beat the Boston Celtics? Could they finally get over the hump? For years prior to 1967, Wilt Chamberlain's kryptonite was Bill Russell and the Boston Celtics. 1967 was finally the year that he was going to get over the hump. Finally had the team, finally had everything else to compete with the Boston Celtics. They were the boogeyman. They were so-called the boogeyman of the league back then because they had won so much. They had dominated so much. They basically, they were the standard bearers of that decade. This is comparable because for a while leading up to that, even though Wilt was the superior player to Russell, the prevailing talk was Russell was a better leader and a better performer down the stretch. So, yeah, that was pretty much anticipation with that series. And they went back and forth as many predicted, Boston didn't go down without a fight. You understand? You still had Russell, still had Cousy, you still had Havlicek, Sam Jones, Frank Sanders, K.C. Jones. I mean, a who's who of it was who's who of all stars. They were the super teammate back then. They were the team that everybody was gunning for. And 1967 would prove to be a different outcome though, because Wilt, you had Lou Jackson, Chet Walker, and Hal Greer, master production of the Boston backcourt with Havlicek and Sam Jones and Cousy. Matter of fact, this was probably Cousy's last year in the NBA, if I'm not mistaken. If anybody knows anything about that, correct me if I'm wrong. But I think this was Cousy's last year in the NBA. They pretty much, and by this time, Russell had become a player/head coach. He became the first player/head coach in the NBA, and that was huge back then. But that series went back and forth. Wilt, as usual, was finally dominant. He dominated the matchup with Bill Russell, even though Russell held his own. And came down to a seventh game, and they were going back and forth. And 76ers finally pulled away in that final game and finally got the monkey off their back. Finally beat the boogeyman that was the Boston Celtics. Wilder was dominant, as usual, but I think the main guy that was key in that victory was Wally Jones off the bench. Now, you had Chet Walker, you had Hal Greer, you had Lou Jackson, Then you had Billy Cunningham, six man, and Matt Lucas, a rookie who was coming up. But I feel like Wally Jones was the difference maker in that Boston 76ers Philly 76ers series, because he had a scoring punch. He had a scoring punch that answered Boston's brilliant bench. Brilliant bench play, and that was, I think, in my opinion, the deciding factor in that series. So then Wilt finally gets the monkey off his back, leads the 76ers to the finals where they would meet a young and up-and-coming San Francisco Warriors team with Nate Thurman and Rick Barry, who were formidable in their own right. But Joe Barry Carroll had to have been on that team in 1967, San Francisco Warriors. Somebody fill me in on that. Was Joe Barry Carroll on that team, or was he more on the team in the 70s, when the 70s came around? I'm thinking, was that maybe Joe Barry Carroll's rookie season or what? But, yeah, long story short, Philly finally got over the hump and everything, and you could tell the 76ers were determined to win this championship. You had Wilt dominating his competition, and then, but he had to work for it because Nate Thurman was one of the most underrated centers in league history, and he was up and coming during that time. And then you had Rick Barry as his running mate. I mean, the Warriors, San Francisco Warriors, got to the finals, and they, held their own with the Sixers. But the overall brilliance, the overall dominance of that 76ers team got them over the hump. And when I think about it, Nate Thurman and Rick Barry did what they could, especially Nate Thurman. Nate Thurman proved he was up-and-coming best centers in the league at that time and held his own against Wilt, but Wilt was just too good. The 76ers were too good, And they win the series 4 games to 1. Wilt, of course, was named MVP of the finals. Alex Hannum was Coach of the Year, and I feel as though 1967 Philadelphia 76ers are definitely one of the most underrated and most underappreciated teams of all time. We always talk about the Celtics, always talk about Lakers, always talk about so on and so forth, but we never mention this particular team, I feel as though this team, with its versatility on defense and its versatility on offense, can match it with any team, past or present. And a lot of people, including people in my generation, don't know much about this team. But I did my homework, and I come to appreciate that team more so than I did in the past. Because I go back, like I said, I've been watching since '89. I go back and do my homework on the past and appreciate that. Appreciate what the past players paved the way for future teams. But tell me what y'all think. Where do y'all rate the 1967 76ers?